بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد المصطفى وعلى آله الأصفياء وأصحابه الأتقياء والتابعين لهم بخير وإحسان إلى يوم الجزاء. Brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum, and to any media professionals who are on right now, we welcome you to this very brief discussion, or we could say a briefing, on our Civil Rights Report, which we released yesterday, that coincides with the National Office of the Council on American Islamic Relations releasing its National Civil Rights Report in regards to our cases of last year, as well as some conclusions and forecasts that we make for this year. And just to give you the format of how this discussion is going to go, I'm going to bring in I took myself off the screen. The director of Safe Spaces, Noor Ali, who will be speaking first, and then CAIR Michigan staff attorney, Sister Amy, will be speaking afterwards, giving some brief reflections or information and as far as our civil rights report. I am clicking right here. Technical difficulties. I'm going to click here in the chat for the report, so you can look in the comment section for the report. Is also on our website, CAIRMichigan.org. You can find the report in full, and specifically to to the Michigan chapter of CAIR, as our results are somewhat different from the national office in terms of state trends. Maybe are different here than in other states. So with that, I am going to pass it over to my colleague, Noor Ali, to make some comments on the report from the perspective of Safe Spaces.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Noor Ali. I'm the director of Safe Spaces here. I started in August of 2022. I took over from the really amazing Zainab Fahas. She was able to do really wonderful work in 2022 that I was able to take over, and really encompasses three main points: our work with law enforcement / the Michigan Department of Corrections, MDOC, also employees like employment agencies, and school-related incidents. So I want to start off with school, because we've had the most success, I would say, in our relationships with school districts across the state, particularly in counties such as Wayne, Macomb, and Oakland. We were able at the beginning of the school year to successfully distribute letters to school districts across the state in order to let them know how they can best serve the Michigan Muslim student population. This includes allowing students to take their First Amendment right to go for Dhuhr prayer in the middle of the school day, giving them a quiet space where they can perform their prayers. This also means that in terms of how they teach Islam and talk about Muslims, what is being distributed is something that is not Islamophobic or Orientalist in nature. We have successfully been able to remove certain books off of shelves in different school libraries and also in school curriculums that have wrongfully targeted Islam and Muslims, and have led to some of our Muslim students being targeted by their peers because of their faith. Obviously, no student, let alone students who are in the K through 12 system, should feel that they have to defend their faith and explain their faith to their classmates. In terms of employment, we were able to successfully do trainings with different employers throughout Michigan, again, to make them aware of how to best accommodate their Muslim staff. Oftentimes, what happens is not so much that the Muslims are, being necessarily targeted, but just that it comes from a place of ignorance. So our goal is to go in there and to educate these employers on, again, explaining to them what Islam is and how they can best accommodate their Muslim staff. Similar to Muslim students, a lot of our employees that come to us with complaints are complaining about not being able to go and pray Dhuhr, or maybe not, getting reprimanded if they were to go and take their lunch break for Jum'ah on Fridays. So we were able to work around these things, alhamdulillah, and alongside Sister Amy, who is our staff attorney, some of these had to be litigated, but through mediation, many of these did not have to be. And the other really wonderful thing that we were able to do with Safe Spaces, again, because of so much of the work that my predecessor Zainab Fahas did, is our amazing work with law enforcement and MDOC. Our incarcerated Muslim brothers and sisters are one of the most vulnerable in society. They are often left out of our minds and da'as as Muslims who are in the free world, but they are a group of people who we often forget how much they deal with on a day-to-day basis. So many things that we take for granted, just even something as simple as breaking your fast on a tamad on a date, we think is so minuscule, but it's actually a very big deal to some of these incarcerated Muslims. And with the work that we've been able to do with MDOC, we have allowed Muslims, incarcerated Muslims, to be given their First Amendment rights to hold communal Jum'ah in different correctional facilities, also ensuring that they are getting approved to go on a halal food diet should they wish to eat halal meat. Obviously, some of these people do not go into these correctional facilities as Muslims. So on the case that they do convert, how can they switch their lifestyle and their diet via the correctional facility that they're staying at? And some of the issues that we have come up with there is, for different religions, they may necessarily have to show their allegiance to a religious leader or a religious group. However, obviously in Islam, we do not have that. So we have successfully been able to also change the way that these facilities approach Muslims and in how they've tried to, quote unquote, prove if they are Muslim or not, by demonstrating that you do not need these things in order to be a Muslim. Alongside MDOC and the work that Sister Amy has done, with the City of Dearborn Police Department, we were able to pass a policy directive that ensures that Muslim women who wear the hijab when they go in for their booking photos, they are not wrongfully, their hijabs are not wrongfully ripped off of their heads. They are not asked to remove any clothing, such as if they're wearing, a loose abaya, or if they're niqabis as well. In the case of somebody who is wearing a hijab, they are allowed to keep their hijab on now, whereas before they were not. And it came up as an issue for multiple women. So alhamdulillah, that has been passed in the city of Dearborn, and I'm very, very hopeful for this next year. We have developed really wonderful relationships with different school districts. I have, through the help of many parents here in the Plymouth Canton School District, we were actually able to start a Muslim Parents Association. And I hope that this is something that we can maybe try to implement in different districts across, Wayne County, Macomb, and Oakland, as these Muslim populations continue to get larger and larger. As always, my information is found on our website. So if there are any things related to school, employment, law enforcement, please go to our office for an official intake and you will be directed to me. So thank you all so much.
Thank you for your update, Sister Noor, regarding safe spaces. And just for clarification purposes for the office, not for the office, I don't know what's wrong with me, it's fasting brain. For the viewing audience, particularly for the Muslims watching, that safe spaces is meant to be a more proactive role in dealing with education and seeking to put forth policies in the public and private sector that would mitigate or maybe even block discrimination taking place to begin with. So that's more of a proactive part of CAIR Michigan and what we do. Um, Without juxtaposing between proactive and reactive, we have many people who contact our office simply because they face grave discrimination, workplace, dealing with law enforcement rights being trampled upon, um, zoning issues with Masajid. And this is where, for lack of a better term, if there's a good cop, then we also have well, I don't know if I should use that terminology, but Sister Amy works more with the reactive part of our office. So I will turn it over to Sister Amy for her to give some of her thoughts about the about our 2022 civil rights cases.
Assalamu alaikum. As Brother Dowd was saying, I'm the staff attorney here for CAIR Michigan, and I agree with what Brother Dowd was saying. We have a good cop and a not so good cop, or what I like to say is a carrot and a stick approach. So Sister Noor is our director of safe spaces. She gets to be the carrot. Unfortunately, that means the legal department gets to be the stick. So we have to enforce the rights of Muslims once mediation and the soft approach doesn't necessarily work. So we started tracking our own data, I think around 2017, the second half of maybe 2017. We started to track what types of intakes were coming into CAIR Michigan. What were the Muslims in Michigan complaining about the most? What types of discrimination and harm were they facing simply for expressing their religious beliefs? Up until about 2 years ago, what we really saw was that the primary way that Muslims were being discriminated against in Michigan was through the government. And we're talking primarily the federal government. We saw a lot of cases coming in that involved FBI interactions for unnecessary leave, just FBI door knocking in heavily Muslim populated cities, or individuals who were traveling overseas coming back into the United States having significant difficulties at the border with secondary screening and lengthy detentions. While we still have a lot of those cases in Michigan, the trend since about 2020, especially 2021 and 2022, has been that we're not seeing as many cases involving the FBI or border interrogations coming into our office. We still have some, and some of the ones that we see are very much escalated. We see a lot of electronic seizures at the border right now. And we see FBI coming to the border right now. But the incidences of border interrogations is really, really down from what it was even in 2022 and 2021. But what we have seen is we've seen a significant increase in really two sectors of cases that we're seeing. And the first one is law enforcement cases, law enforcement discrimination cases, and complaints about discrimination in education. When we're talking about the law enforcement discrimination cases in 2020 didn't even make the top 5 list of the amount of intakes that we were getting. But in 2022, law enforcement discrimination cases made up 12% of all of our overall intakes that we did. And what are we seeing when we're talking about law enforcement cases? Well, we're seeing women, as Sister Noor was saying, who are encountering law enforcement being stripped of their hijab or their religious outer garments when they're encountering law enforcement. In 2022, we actually had 2 lawsuits that settled. Both of them involving a woman who was wrongfully arrested, stripped of her hijab, and then one of them was ultimately went to trial and was acquitted of the charges that were brought against her, one in the city of Ferndale and one in the city of Detroit. And the city of Ferndale case was significantly egregious because the person was arrested by the city of Ferndale Police Department, and she wasn't even in the city of Ferndale. She was actually traveling inside the city of Detroit, inside of Wayne County, and was put over for what we believe was a discriminatory traffic stop. And as a result was arrested, had her hijab removed, was subjected to a cross-gender search, and had a photograph taken without her hijab on. We filed that case in 2020. We settled that lawsuit in 2022. And it resulted in really a snowball effect. We saw more women who had this problem in different law enforcement aspects coming to us and saying, hey, this happened to me. And we were able to go in and really rewrite policies, not just for the city of Ferndale, but the city of Ferndale, Genesee County, the city of Detroit, and as Sister Noor said, the city of Dearborn as well. So that's one way that we've seen law enforcement discrimination cases come to us. Another way that we've seen law enforcement discrimination cases come to us involve actual police officers who are discriminating against Muslims because of their own implicit bias. We have one case right now against the city of Detroit where 3 Muslim men called the city of Detroit Police Department out to their house for assistance because they had somebody who was suffering a mental health crisis in their home, and they wanted this person to be taken to the hospital. When the police arrived, they made really, really bigoted comments about the Muslims, about how Muslims lie, about how they don't like women, and they were joking around. And then they ended up arresting the men. They spent 3 days in jail, and they were ultimately released without charge because they had done nothing wrong, to be honest with you. So we're litigating that case as well. So we see discrimination. We see the ways in which law enforcement bias about somebody might lead to their wrongful arrest simply for being Muslim. But we have other cases where we've had victims of crimes, including an Arab Muslim man in Macomb County who was the victim of a road rage incident for doing nothing more than his job. And he was followed onto a property and was really assaulted by two men who were engaged in what was blatantly road rage. They followed him in there. They said they did it because they didn't like the way he was driving. But then the Macomb County sheriffs show up, and all of a sudden our client's in handcuffs, and our client is being treated like he's the criminal, despite the fact that he was assaulted, and the other men were joked around with and they were let go while our client was searched and handcuffed for a lengthy amount of time. So law enforcement incidences involving bias against Muslims really manifest in a number of ways. And people started to understand that CAIR-Michigan engaged in this work. So now we're seeing a lot more intakes coming in with regards to this. And the second way that we're seeing intakes are really the education cases. We've seen really a political shift over the last 2 years specifically that have led to problems in the classroom and problems out of the classroom, with problems with curriculum that is Islamophobic, Orientalist in nature, and really just paints Islam with this broad stroke of discrimination. And we also see school bullying where students are being bullied for being Muslim, and comments are being made about Islam that are really derogatory towards Islam, not just by students, but also by teachers, by faculty. And we've had to go in on several occasions to particular schools in Washtenaw County, for instance, and address this issue of teachers making comments and putting students in a way where they feel like they have to defend themselves and they have to defend their religion, or otherwise they feel like they have to remain silent so they're not ostracized by their peers. So these are things that we have had to deal with a lot. And when we're talking about education cases really have increased by more than 30% over the last year. They were just a couple years ago, 4% of our overall intakes. Now they make up over 9% of our intakes. And when I'm looking at the trends and the information that's already coming into CAIR-Michigan for the first quarter of 2023, it looks like those education numbers are going to be even higher this year. We're still having increased problems with the school district. I'm actually heading out to Troy today to deal with an issue in the Troy Athens High School with regards to religious discrimination once we end this. So we've seen a shift from policies set by one federal government agency that targeted Muslims in a specific way, inherently targeted Muslims for disparate treatment and for discrimination, to being a shift towards other policies and other ideologies that are now pushing Islam to the fringes again, but in a different way, by othering them and maybe not directly assaulting Islam, but doing it in a more covert and social way, as opposed to like with a direct policy that impacts Muslims. So I think Brother Dawood is going to talk a little bit about how we're planning on moving ahead in 2023 so that we can do this, but it involves a lot of strategy and planning, on CAIR-Michigan's part that we're engaged in currently to see how we can combat and how we really will change the way that we do business in Michigan so that we can make sure that we're meeting the new and emerging needs of our constituent base. So thank you, Brother Dowd.
Thank you, Sister Amy. So just to wrap up and make some final comments, as CAIR National released its report yesterday, nationwide, there was a 23% decline in civil rights cases nationwide from 2022 to 2021. As it relates to Michigan, we did not have that high percentage of a decline as nationwide in other states. But as Sister Amy mentioned, there was a shift, and this shift, we believe, is relating to different social political realities. So as it was 2 years ago, and this was during the Trump era, we had a much higher percentage of cases of harassment from the Federal Bureau of Investigations and CBP, Customs Border Protection. So now what we're seeing now in statistics is basically our cases in regards to those two entities are basically going back to Obama era percentages, which is still not good, still not high, because the second year of the Obama administration, the cases went up from the first year of the Obama administration, right? So it's not as if the so-called progressives were all that great either in terms of federal law enforcement. But it did get worse under Trump. So this is some news as far as the percentage of our cases. Now, as Sister Amy mentioned, number one, we've had a higher degree of law enforcement cases and situations from local police departments, hence legal action that we are currently taking against the Detroit Police Department, for instance, right now. She mentioned Ferndale, in which we are working on a report with the sister organization, Force Detroit, that will be coming out later on this year, God willing, and showing who Ferndale police actually pulls and stops, right? And that will be some very interesting data. We have the data, but we're not going to release that as of right now. But very troubling issues of profiling and improper treatment of people of color in general, but also Muslims specifically. And then we have the increase of the educational issues as the percentages were just touched on by Sister Amy. In this regard to these cases, and I will take a step back. Number one, we have our goal of the year 2022 going to 2023 as far as being more active in regards to affirming our rights and lobbying for our rights through the legislative process of dealing with representatives in Lansing, as well as more so even on the local level with school boards. So this is one of our goals for this year. We did miss also the last election, but in previous years, we were able to put a legislative report card in which we graded state representatives, state senators, the governor, as well as federal congressmen, congresswomen, and federal senators in regards to how they voted on certain civil rights issues. And we are going to return back to doing that, we as a nonprofit organization. And we believe that the Muslim community has a right to know how their representatives vote on key issues as it relates to civil rights, including religious rights, right? Because, an informed community is better to able to organize itself around issues that matter to it. And we have a particular niche, which is civil rights and religious rights in particular. As Sister Amy mentioned, the trends, what we can say for sure is that our community is beginning to be challenged more from a policy perspective and as well as material, not from people who consider themselves social conservatives, but perhaps even more so a growing trend from people who call themselves liberals or so-called progressives. This relates to Orientalist tropes and books being put forward in school, things that are being said by teachers who claim to be progressive, that would seek to make the sacred law of Islam as seemingly misogynist, in statements such as this said. Books being put forward in school that have skewed messages about Muslims, such as Persepolis and the likes of that. We also have the issue of religious rights being challenged by our students, where students are made to be bullied around the issues of pronouns. Or we've had cases of Muslim young ladies in bathrooms who are adjusting their hijab, and someone walks into the bathroom while they are by themselves in the bathroom, and the person claims to be a female that day because they assert that they're gender fluid, right? These sorts of issues that are taking place, to the extent that we have Muslim students who say that they are scared to even use the bathroom and will hold it all day, which of course we know that can cause bladder infections, urinary tract problems, constipation, IMSAC, like other things, right? And no minor should be subjected to that, where in the name of someone else's inclusion, for someone else's inclusion, it's our exclusion, right? And we see this as a growing trend that we're going to have to deal with, much less book materials that are put in schools that have lewd and lascivious content. So these are some of the challenges that we foresee coming through. As the viewing audience knows, that CAIR Michigan is very vocal in regards to asking for stronger language in the Civil Rights Act of the Elliott-Larsen Act, in which 22 other states and the District of Columbia had stronger language for religious protections. And we are concerned about its passage and the lack of robust language. And we've already given presentations on the legal peril for faith-based organizations, much less a private sector business such as a female-only gym in Dearborn, where someone can come and potentially sue the gym because they can walk in and say that they feel like a woman, and putting them in legal jeopardy. So we are reaching out to Islamic organizations and requesting to look at bylaws to hopefully help in their incorporation, and to give best steps and tips, while at the same time we will be working throughout the year at different opportunities to try to get the proper language reinserted into the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act, because just because it's been signed by the governor doesn't mean that reps now cannot lobby or change to put in stronger language, or with the next election, and perhaps there's a shift in the House, or a shift in the state Senate in the next election, then perhaps that's another way in which we could get the language introduced. So those are the things that we are dealing with. I conclude with two things. For media professionals who may be watching now, or watching this in its entirety in the next day or so, or even next week, you can reach out to my colleagues, and their numbers and emails are on the website, Sister Amy and Sister Noor. You can reach out to them for comments, media professional. And I'm saying specifically, reach out to them, not to me. They'll make the comments. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is for the Muslims who are watching this. We're in the last 10 days of Shahr Ramadan, the month in which the Quran was revealed, the month of fasting, the month in which 313 Sahaba with lesser provisions were able to get victory, bifadlillah, over 1,000 mushrikeen who were seeking to wipe Islam off the face of the earth. That is this month, the month of Siyam, the month of Sadaqah, the month of Tilawatul Quran, and the month of Nusra, the month of divine assistance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In saying that, in these last 20 days in which we are supposed to strive even harder, I ask you to give donations to CAIR Michigan. We are able to do what we do because we are independent. And there's a saying, who funds you runs you. And other advocacy organizations that work for our community, most of them are primarily funded by, or a large percentage of their budget are funded by foundations that are outside of our community. So who funds you runs you. They either help set the agenda or you self-police yourself about what you're not going to talk about because you're scared of getting your loot or your money cut off. We are independent. We are funded by you. We are a grassroots organization, and thus we are dependent after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are dependent on the mu'mineen and mu'minat for us to be able to continue doing our work. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Man naqasa sadaqatun min mal." Excuse me, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man naqasa sadaqatun min mal." That giving and sadaqah will not decrease your wealth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Hadith Qudsi, "Anfiq ya ibn Adam unfiq alayk." Spend, O child of Adam, then what I will replace and I will spend on you. So please be generous during this blessed month of Ramadan. We are a CAIR-MI eligible organization because we service two of the groups of fuqara wa masakin, of the indigent as well as the poor who come to us. And we also, of course, take the sadaqah that you give fi sabilillah. And we have a very lean budget, to say the least. People think that we are this huge multi-million-dollar operation. And when I tell donors how large our staff is and how many interns we have and what our actual budget is, then they say, subhanAllah, there must be barakah on your work because we thought that you were like some big, like large corporation. Nope, it's not the case. So with that, my brothers and sisters in Islam, we will conclude with this. I ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept all of your charitable giving, accept all of your fasting, accept all of your prayers at night, accept all your recitation of the Quran, accept all of your good deeds. I ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give shifa, to give healing to any of your family members or yourselves who may be suffering any ailments. I ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our community, to protect our children, Ya Allah, to protect our children, Ya Allah, to protect our children, Ya Allah. I ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during this blessed month of Ramadan, during this month in which the Quran was revealed, to have all of our sins forgiven, to have our mistakes covered, to replace our bad deeds with good deeds, to raise our maqamat, to raise our spiritual stations, to bring our hearts together more in love for each other, for us not to be so harsh with each other, to have mercy and soften our hearts amongst us as brothers and sisters in Islam, and to make us be a greater benefit for all the children of Adam, be those people Muslim or be those people not be Muslim, per the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sayyidu Qawmi Khadimuhum, that the leader of a people is their servant. And with that, I conclude, my brothers and sisters in Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.